Hello there, and welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the SPES training Dussacks, the synthetic training Dussacks that they produce. Have a look, see what I think, give you my opinion on them, look at the basic specs. Now there are lots of different types of sort of training Dussacks out there. You come across some wooden ones, some leather ones, some synthetic, and they're all designed to replicate the kind of the training weapons that you see in some of the Renaissance texts. So I work from Meyer. Anybody that's looked at Meyer will be familiar with the kind of slightly strange looking Dussacks that they're practicing with. Now, of course, in Meyer, as he explains in the Dussack section, the Dussack is used to train for all common single-handed cut and thrust swords. I'm paraphrasing there, but he says it's the most common weapon after the longsword. So you train with something like this so that you could then go and use an actual, say, military Dussack or Tessack, or to go and use, say, a single-handed sword, arming sword, a falchion, Katzbalger, but basically anything you'd come across that's single-handed and designed for cut and thrust, just a bog-standard common single-handed sword. And of course it also became a really popular weapon in the Fecht School, both for training and sort of for competition, so both a sportive and a sort of a military training system. But forgetting about that, looking at the actual weapon that we've got here, what is it like? Well, and how does it sort of reflect the historical originals? Well, sadly, the originals are not exactly in abundance in terms of those used for training. So were they made out of leather? Were they made out of wood? Did it vary in different schools or different regions, different time periods? There's lots of argument as to what exactly they were made of and how well they functioned. So I have a variety of different types. I'll make use of the you've got the old classic, come here, sort of leather versions. This one's got sort of like a synthetic spine on it to provide it with a little bit of extra rigidity over time. So you get those, you get solid wood, and then you get these. But today's video isn't about those, it's just about the SPES one. So what do you actually get? Well, they're quite cheap, and it comes as just this piece of cut and smoothed off piece of plastic. So nothing particularly fancy there, and it does actually look, I'll come back a bit, it does look like a lot of the examples you see in original manuals, as in basically something that is actually quite ugly. And as lots of people have said, look, if you put two of them together, looks like you've got a giant pair of scissors. So, not the most thrilling of designs. And in terms of the one that SPES have made, it's cruder than I thought it would be. So it's just a completely flat piece of plastic, shaped, edges smoothed off, and with this hole to put your hand. So nothing else there. I suppose you've got a slightly spatulated tip. It flexes a little bit, not much. Because of the thinness of the plastic, it's very uncomfortable to hold. So the hole is big enough that you can put all kinds of gloves in there, but you've got a very thin section resting against the ball of your thumb, the inside of your hand. Basically the entire thing is quite uncomfortable, and also very easily rotates when you don't want it to. Now with Meyer, there are a lot of different types of grips. So you have the thumb on the back, thumb on the inside, thumb on the outside, hand coming towards the back with the thumb on the back. There's a whole variety of different types of grips, and it will work with them. But unfortunately, because of the thinness and the sort of slippiness, I don't know. Anyway, because of how much it slips in your hand, you actually end up forming some of those grips and other grips without even intending it. It just kind of slides around in your hand. So that's not great. The other thing is edge-on-edge contact. They're not very sticky. They just bounce straight off each other. So if you want to slide around, you're working on winding actions. They do wind really nicely. But if you're sort of cutting to kind of clear yourself as you're moving in, so you're delivering cutting actions to try and seek a bind and then working around the bind, it can be quite hard to maintain a bind with them because they just bounce off each other so easily. They just hit and they fly straight back off again. And that brings me to the thing I really don't like, is that when it does make contact, vibration goes throughout the entire thing and straight up into your fingers and your hand and your arm. And it can be really quite painful, to the level that if you have to bring it up into some of the hanging parries, even if you're bracing it with your left arm, or just got your hand up here just to take some of the weight, it puts a real shock through your body, unlike any of the other swords I've used. So I don't know if you can see any. If you look at, say, a black fencer synthetic, it sort of seems to absorb a reasonable amount of energy, whereas this, rather than absorb, it just transfers it from the weapon straight to you. So I didn't really like that too much. It's also why I got Nick. Nick is basically my sort of artificer. When something needs to be done, you pass it off to Nick. So if you've got a Dorothea and you want it slashed down to size, you give it to Nick. And likewise with these Dussacks that I bought, he had some tennis wrap, which he wrapped around the grip, and suddenly it's a much better Dussack. Now I know SPES do another version. They do one with a slightly enlarged nagel on one side, so the nail that protects the outside, and it has a bit of hand protection as well. But I'm not reviewing the Dussack that I don't have. I'm reviewing the Dussack that I do have. So Nick modified this, and it does make a big difference. You still feel those shocks coming through the weapon, but it's easier to grip now. When you form a guard, or form a grip I should say, it's more likely to stay there, which is kind of handy. So you're less likely to slide around in the hand. The edges don't feel quite so sharp now because you've got this padded material on there, so again it doesn't push into your wrist and hurt quite so much, and it takes a little bit of the sting out of the vibrations when the weapon is struck. So good upgrade. As we've both found though, it needs more. Ideally 2 lots of tennis tape wrapped around, which I suspect will bring it closer to the slightly more expensive model that they sell. Now in terms of actual sparring, they're a lot of fun. They're quite weighty, moving towards the front, so they're not maybe quite as quick as you would think, but they do hit really hard. So I've got to be careful, I don't want to slash the ceiling to pieces, but if you've got the Dussack in a relatively high position, or even if you're resting it on your shoulder, or you're sort of in the Wrath Guard and you bring it back, and then you step forwards and come in with a reasonably powerful strike. If this hits the arm or the collar, it really hits hard. And I'm talking meaty longsword hard. So don't think just because it's synthetic that you can just go and wear a sort of a top like this and a helmet and gloves and then just go all out because it's a nice, light, safe, Dussack for a bit of a laugh. That's not what it is. It does hit hard, so you need to be sensible or slow it down. So again, that's the version without the mods, and that's the version with the mods. Now, price-wise, I'll put the link in, because the prices are all over the place at the moment, so I'll pop the link in the description, but they are relatively cheap. I think it was about 35 quid, or £35 or so, but again, check the description for the specifics. So, they're relatively cheap, okay, they're very cheap, and you can get them pretty much any time of the year. So if you think I really could do with 8 of these for my group or something, within a week you can have them, and there's a lot to be said for that. I've been trying to get good steel Dussacks for nearly 2 years now, and so far the only Dussack I've actually got my hands on is the Landsknecht Emporium Dorothea, which had to be modified by Nick to make it reasonably usable. All the rest of the ones I'm waiting for. I've got 3 in production and none of them have come yet. So, that is the SPES Dussack. Doesn't flex a huge amount, hits hard, a little painful on the hands. Modify it with some tennis wrap, and it's reasonably usable. Just be careful and sensible with the sparring. Other than that, it's an entertaining weapon, and once you get used to using a Dussack, you'll find your close-up sort of game when you're sparring. So fighting in the Krieg phase, with kind of the German tradition. When you move to other weapons, you'll be much more confident. So once you're used to using this and you're stepping in and you're using it offhand, and maybe to support the weapon or to try and grab theirs, to lock their arm, even to displace their weapon, so you see you're doing a little bit more of the kind of the Messer type stuff. When you get comfortable doing that, you can then start applying it to your other weapons, and you won't be standing off all the time. You'll actually be happier, or not happier, but you'll be more comfortable than you were moving into those middle and closer distances, which is what the Dussack really helps you train and practice for. So there you go, relatively short video because there's not really a huge amount to say about them. That's the SPES synthetic Dussack, and again, any questions that you want to ask, pop them in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, please subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel. Thank you.